The unnerving echo of malevolent laughter rings out through the dark alleyways of Gotham City, heralding the return of that maestro of mad mirth, the Joker, setting out on another mischievous crime spree. The Caped Crusaders set out to capture him, but they do not reckon upon the sinister scheme the Joker has for them: to strand Batman and Robin on the moon. Greetings and welcome to another installment of the DC Comics Silver and Bronze Age podcast. As usual, I am your congenial host, Larry, and I'll be your intrepid guide as we delve into DC Comics past, and together we'll thrill to the adventures of your favorite DC Comics superheroes. I think today's installment will be a fun one, folks, as we put the spotlight on the Joker, Batman and Robin's most persistent, or perhaps not so persistent arch-enemy, as far as DC Comics Silver Age is concerned. In fact, in the comic book we'll be taking a close look at today, Detective Comics number 388 from June of 1969, is the last Silver Age DC comic the Joker will be appearing in before transitioning into the Bronze Age. Yes, folks, the Joker would not appear again in either Detective Comics or Batman, or any other title for that matter, until 4 years later. Now, perhaps you're wondering, why didn't the Joker appear more often in both Bat titles during the Silver Age? After all, isn't he the Masked Manhunter's most famous foe? Well, let me elaborate on that for a bit. If we take the beginning of DC Comics Silver Age with Showcase number 4 from October of 1956, which was the first appearance of Barry Allen as the Flash, and use that as a base factor for chronological order, and if the Joker figured prominently in the comic and appeared on the cover of the issues, then the Joker returned to plague Batman and Robin only 6 times in the Batman title itself, and only 4 times in Detective Comics, and that's including issue 388. So yeah, you could say the Joker returned to harass the Masked Manhunters only a smattering of times. We have to keep in mind that during most of the early 60s, Batman and Robin were battling alien invasions, otherworldly menaces, and crooks with elaborate schemes. At times, both Bat titles were hampered by quite silly aspects like Batman gaining superpowers or other unusual abilities, having an animal sidekick named Ace the Bat Hound, the extra-dimensional troublemaker and Bat fan, Batmite, and needless supporting characters like Batwoman and an early version of Batgirl before Barbara Gordon took over the role. So yes, one could suppose in lieu of all of the sci-fi silliness and additional sidekick shenanigans, hardly any room was given for any of the Batman's rogues gallery, much less the Joker. Oh, and by the way, the Joker's first official return to the life of Batman in the Bronze Age is in the iconic issue of Batman number 251 titled The Joker's Five-Way Revenge. This would feature the Joker significantly changed and far more dangerous than ever before. More on that later. Alright, enough about the history lesson. We've got a story to check out, so let's get to it, shall we? Detective Comics number 388 was scripted by regular Silver Age writer John Broome. Art chores for the issue was by Bob Brown. The inking was executed by frequent inker Joe Gaella, and the editor for the book was Julius Schwartz. The striking cover art for the issue was drawn by future Batman artist Irv Novick and Gaspar Saladino. The Joker has returned to Gotham City after significant time in prison, committing a series of crimes at night under the full moon. The news media and Gothamites dub him Public Lunatic number 1 after his lunar-inspired crime spree. Batman and Robin begin investigating, meeting the Joker at a local planetarium, but are unable to capture him. The next day at the Wayne Foundation, a demonstration of an anti-gravity device invented by a scientist named Dr. Doomer is being held, but to those present, including Bruce Wayne himself, they discover that the device was stolen and replaced by a phony replica. Bruce discovers a clue pointing to the Joker as the culprit of the theft. Afterward, with the stolen device in hand, the Joker and his gang of crooks invade Gotham Central Station, transforming the spacious lobby into a weightless trap for the police as well as the Caped Crusaders, who arrive just in time to be caught floating in the air. Both officers and masked heroes alike cannot thwart the Joker and his men, and the Masked Manhunters are knocked out, ready for the Joker to take the dynamic duo captive. Batman and Robin soon recover, but discover to their horror that they are dressed in spacesuits and are on the moon, seemingly cut off from the Earth. The Joker speaks to the heroes through radios built into their helmets, taunting them to find a way to escape before they freeze to death. The anti-gravity effect is activated once more, and Batman and Robin float helplessly in the air. Batman soon deduces the whole scene is nothing more than an extravagant deception to trap and destroy him and his partner. But through quick maneuvering, Batman smashes the troublesome unit, and together they defeat the Joker and his henchmen. Only after the mocking Montebank and his gang are safely secured that Batman explains to Robin that they are inside a cavern somewhere on the outskirts of Gotham City, set up to look like the landscape of the moon. He also goes on to say the vital clue to unraveling the Joker's scheme was a stalagmite he spotted in the cave, and that stalagmites only grow inside caves. The following day, Dr. Doomer is visited by the dynamic duo, informing him that his invention was wrecked during the Joker's capture, and that the public would have to wait years before the device could be reinvented. Well, that's all's well that ends well for Batman and Robin, huh, folks? That was quite an action-packed tale, with just the right amount of detective work, slam-bang action, and just a little dash of space-age fiction thrown into it for good measure. I suppose writer John Broome couldn't quite shake off the lingering sci-fi trappings which caused the downward slump in sales for a few years earlier in the Bat titles. That was until Julius Schwartz came up with a means of boosting sales again with the concept of the New Look Batman. Yes, folks, the New Look Batman. And, yes, ladies and gentlemen, I can hear the bitter pissing and moaning from a portion of those rabid Bat fans now. Oh, that ugly yellow oval. It's so corny and awful. Why didn't they just leave Batman's costume alone? Well, folks, we'll venture into the various reasons into that intriguing facet of Batman's history in a future program. As mentioned earlier in this program, Detective Comics number 388 was the last Silver Age Joker story. Then, in Batman number 251 in 1973, the roguish clown prince of crime was transformed back into the murderously maniacal Harlequin of Hate. This drastic but necessary change in personality was brought about by editor Julius Schwartz and writer Dennis O'Neil. Yes, that same Dennis O'Neil, the same loony leftist writer responsible for such literary gems as the down-to-earth, relatable Superman, which of course didn't last very long, and the depowered Amazon-turned-globe-trotting adventurer Diana Prince. The less said about that horrendous bollocks concerning that period in Wonder Woman's history, the better, I'd say. Now, to be fair to Dennis O'Neil, not all of his touchy-feely writing efforts were complete clunkers. Like, for instance, the legendary team-up of Green Lantern and Green Arrow in the Green Lantern title. It's also worth noting that O'Neil, along with regular collaborator artist Neil Adams, would revitalize Batman in the Bronze Age, bringing him back to the obsessive, relentless Dark Knight detective of the 40s before the Caped Crusader was teamed up with his young ward, Richard Grayson. We will also explore Batman's first foray into the Bronze Age under writer O'Neil and artist Adams in a future episode as well. Alright, now that we're at the point in the show where we get to see some of the important events in history, so we'll take a look at the lineup of events from June of 1969. First of all, we have June the 3rd. While operating at sea on Ceto maneuvers, the Australian aircraft carrier HMAS Melbourne accidentally rams and slices into the American destroyer USS Frank E. Evans in the South China Sea, killing 74 American seamen. June the 5th, an international communist conference begins in Moscow. Also on that day, in the first authenticated case of falling space debris causing damage on Earth, the Japanese freighter ship Daiichi Chennai was heavily damaged by wreckage from a Soviet spacecraft that had re-entered Earth's atmosphere. As well, on that day, the Tupolev Tu-144 supersonic jet became the first civilian airliner to be test-flown faster than the speed of sound. On June the 7th, The long-awaited debut of Eric Clapton and Steve Winwood performing together in the short-lived supergroup Blind Faith took place in front of 100,000 people in London's Hyde Park. Also on that day, the U.S. Department of Defense expanded its AUTOVON, an acronym for Automatic Voice Network, to its military posts worldwide, giving priority to all defense-related phone calls over civilian landlines. June the 8th, Francisco Franco orders the closing of the Gibraltar-Spain border and communications between Gibraltar and Spain in response to the 1967 Gibraltar sovereignty referendum. The border remains closed until a partial reopening on December the 15th, 1982. June the 8th, U.S. President Richard Nixon and South Vietnamese President Nguyen Van Thieu meet at Midway Island. Nixon announces that 25,000 U.S. troops will be withdrawn by September. June the 12th, NASA announced that Apollo 11 was cleared for launch on July 16th for the first manned landing on the moon. U.S. Air Force Lieutenant General Sam C. Phillips, the director of the Apollo program, was given the go-ahead after an 80-minute telephone conference between NASA officials at Houston, Cape Kennedy, Huntsville, and Washington. June the 15th, Georges Pompidou is elected president of France. June the 17th, after a 23-game match, Boris Spassky defeats Tigran Petrosian to become the world chess champion in Moscow. June the 18th to the 22nd. The National Convention of the Students for a Democratic Society held in Chicago collapses, and the Weathermen faction seizes control of the SDS National Office. Thereafter, any activity run from the national office or bearing the name SDS is Weathermen controlled. Also on June the 22nd, the Cuyahoga River fire helped spur an avalanche of water pollution control activities, resulting in the Clear Water Act, Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, and the creation of the Federal Environment Protection Agency. Also on the 22nd, Judy Garland, the singer and actress, most famous for her role as Dorothy on the classic film The Wizard of Oz, dies of a drug overdose in her London home. June the 23rd, Warren E. Burger is sworn in as Chief Justice of the United States by retiring Chief Justice Earl Warren. June the 24th, the United Kingdom and Rhodesia severed diplomatic relations after Rhodesian constitutional referendum. On June the 26th, a former NASA official told reporters in Houston that lunar module pilot Edwin Buzz Aldrin had originally been scheduled to become the first man to set foot on the moon during the upcoming Apollo 11 mission, but that mission commander Neil Armstrong was not unaware of the importance of being the first, and that Armstrong decided to supersede Aldrin. June the 28th, the Stonewall riots, a milestone in the modern gay rights movement in the United States, began in New York City when an angry crowd of bystanders began throwing bottles, rocks, and even a parking meter at NYPD patrolmen who were carrying out a routine raid on the Stonewall Inn, a gay hangout at 53 Christopher Street in the Greenwich Village section of Manhattan. Well, so much for the historical events. Now, in entertainment, as far as movies go, 1969 overall was a great year for films, with an impressive lineup of movies that became all-time classics in view of modern movie fans for years to come. Starting in descending order along the way up to the number one spot for the top-grossing films of 1969, we have number 10, On Her Majesty's Secret Service from United Artists, number 9, Goodbye Columbus from Paramount, number 8, Cactus Flower from Columbia, number 7, True Grit from Paramount. Number 6, The Italian Job, also from Paramount. Number 5, Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice from Columbia. Number 4, Hello Dolly from 20th Century Fox. Number 3, Easy Rider from Columbia. Number 2, Midnight Cowboy from United Artists. And the number one spot goes to the biggest box office film in 1969, the most popular American Western film of that year, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, directed by George Roy Hill and starring Paul Newman and Robert Redford. On the pop music scene, 1969 was the end of the era where pop music singles were geared towards kids and children, and that particular genre was on the wane. And more adult-oriented genres such as singer-songwriter folk rock gained popularity, as well as Motown artists and bands gaining even greater prominence in the charts. Perhaps the two most famous musical events of 1969 were concerts. At a Rolling Stones concert in Altamont, California, a fan was stabbed to death by Hell's Angels, a biker gang that had been hired to provide security for the event. In retrospect, some commentators have concluded that the violence signaled the end of the hippie movement, which espoused an ethos of free love and peace. Even more famous than the Altamont incident and concert was the Woodstock Festival, in which consisted of dozens of the most famous performers in the world at the time, playing together in an atmosphere of peace with nature and love, with many thousands of concert-goers. It is still one of the largest concerts in the history of the world. So, the top 10 singles for 1969, according to Billboard magazine, from descending order, we have number 10, Elvis Presley with In the Ghetto. Number 9, The Fifth Dimension with Aquarius, Let the Sun Shine In. Number 8, The Beatles with Come Together. The number 7 spot was also dominated by the Beatles with The Ballad of John and Yoko. Number 6, Tommy James and the Shondells with Crimson and Clover. Number 5, Zager and Evans with In the Year 2525. Number 4, The Rolling Stones with Honky Tonk Woman. Number 3, Elvis Presley again with Suspicious Minds. The Beatles one more time with the number 2 spot with Get Back, and the number 1 hit single for the year 1969, according to Billboard magazine, was an odd little ditty, a holdover from the bubblegum pop genre, from this fictional garage band founded by Archie Andrews, Reggie Mantle, Jughead Jones, Veronica Lodge, and Betty Cooper, who were collectively known as the Archies. You know, the Archies, that band from the cartoon as well. Their hit took the number 1 spot with Sugar Sugar. Now, all right, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, that about wraps it up for this episode of the podcast. Before I say goodbye, I'd like to thank everybody who listened to this, and I invite you to stick around with me as I continue this podcast. If you would be so kind, please like and subscribe to this channel for more episodes, and if you have any comments or suggestions, then please feel free to post them in the comments section below. It would be greatly appreciated. So until next time, this is Larry, aka the Charming Curmudgeon. So long for now.